Well, thanks very much indeed. Welcome to the channel. My name is Jim Ferguson, and I've got two fantastic guests with me today. Right said Fred, Richard Fairbrass, and his brother Fred. Great to see you both. How are you doing, guys?
We're good, thanks, Jim.
We're
Yep,
I was just pointing out that it is March, but we have our Christmas tree up. And the reason is because it's been so dark and miserable. I was about to take it down. My wife said, no, leave it up, because it's so grey out there. And it's just picking up now. The skies are beginning to get blue, so we might take it down.
Also, it gives a certain legitimacy to the fact that I demand presents all year round.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to say, I'm glad you mentioned it, because if people are watching this, they're going to say, Jim recorded that in December, you know? Obviously we didn't.
I can guarantee it's March 4th.
It's March the 4th, yeah.
We need to hold up a newspaper to prove it.
Yes, exactly, like a hostage.
Yeah. I can hold my phone up if you want.
For all the people who are watching this, I mean, you guys don't need much of an introduction, to be honest with you. You're the two of the most iconic pop stars, really, of the UK. From back in the day, you know, not that long ago, and people love your music around the world. You're world famous. You're incredibly successful, and I thought maybe we could just go back to history, because I remember watching you guys. First time I ever saw you playing was on Top of the Pops, and it blew me away. I thought, look at those guys, and I thought it was brilliant. I'm too sexy. Yeah. I'm too sexy for my shirt. I mean. What I'd love to know, guys, is what was it like? Because you're ordinary guys. You've come from a sort of an ordinary background, like most of the rest of us.
Yes. But
you made it really big. You got really successful, and you still are. And we'll come on to that stuff in a minute. But at what point did you realise that you've done something quite amazing here? And what did that feel like?
First time we thought we'd done something amazing was in America.
Yeah.
When we landed, we were actually in, where were we? St. Lucia, and we were leaving because actually there'd been some homophobic problems in the hotel, so we were having there was a bit of
all my fault, of course.
Yeah, exactly. and we've been threatened with a machete in the capital, and so we just thought, yes, jump on a plane and leave. And we were going to Miami, and we were literally just in the airport, and the airport was deserted. It's just us and people we were with, and the phone, this sort of isolated phone rang, and this lady came out and answered and said, our manager was with us. I said, is there a Tamsin here? So, you know, Tamsin picks up the phone and she starts crying. So we thought, what the hell's going on? She said, you guys are #1 in America.
And that was it. That was
yeah. So we that was like, what the hell's going on? Because Sexy was turned down by everybody. And we then released it sort of in collaboration with a promotions company. It wasn't a real record label. There was no record deal in place. And it only charted in America on import, went top 40, I think. And all the labels everywhere turned it down, and suddenly this record just kicks off. And we had no control over it.
But also, I think for us at least, when we started off, it's not like you've got bucket loads of money in the bank and you don't want to risk it, so you play safe. Yeah. We had nothing. Yeah. We had nothing. Yeah. So it didn't matter to us whether we were taking a chance or not. The fact that it only dawned on us that it didn't sound like everybody else when we did loads of interviews and people said, where did you get the idea from? And are you Australian? That was the other one. We were Australian. Yeah. So when you don't have anything to lose, you kind of just go back against the wall, and you don't, Yeah. That was it, really.
And of course, I mean, you had that image as well. I mean, you had the muscles. You look really good. I mean, and you had the confidence. I mean, you guys blew everybody away. I mean, you were just out there giving it large. Yeah. And I think a lot of people thought, you know what, really like it. And I remember the other comparison, possibly slight comparison, was I remember another very famous British pop star, of course, was Boy George. I remember when he first appeared on Top of the Pops as well. It was like, wow, that's different,
exactly.
you know?
Yeah. And I think the same with Frank goes to Hollywood. I think they had that impact.
Yeah.
The British scene back in the day tended to be much more inventive than it is now. I think it's very, very conservative now. And if you cast your mind back to people like Matt, I mean, I was thinking about Mad this other day. You actually think completely out there, one step beyond actually was. So, I think it's a real shame that the British pop scene has become so, I don't know whether you want to call it vanilla or
Risk averse.
It's very risk averse, yeah. And that's partly companies, record companies. It's also partly artists, I think, who are too frightened to step out of line in a way.
Well, you look at the Isle of Wight lineup this year. I mean, it looks like, you know.
So I think that's.
I don't know what's going on there.
It's a shame because back in the day, Americans were really good at the, you know, the sort of musicality of it, if you like. You know, there was some really strong musicians in America. But what the UK had was eccentricity and a kind of outlet. And that has gone to a large extent. I think we ape America far too much. And I think record companies have a duty, and radio has a duty too, to find the extreme. I really do. I think it's.
I think also now, I mean, when we broke it, there were a lot of independent labels. It wasn't unusual for an independent record to break.
No.
I mean, it was unusual in terms of America, but in terms of the UK, there were independent labels. But I don't know how many people know this, but in 1996, Bill Clinton signed a Telecommunications Act. And what that basically did was that handed over a lot of the chart control, chart access to the major labels. Because if you make the charts based on playlists, your radio play and sales, the major labels can control the radio play to a degree, much easier than a independent. So in a way now, but I see it online all the time. People talking about, you know, we get slagged off, or where were you last number one? You know, and I have to tell them, actually, I've had 3 number ones in America in the last 5 years. So
be quiet.
So be quiet. But what's interesting is that the audiences, where they used to drive the industry, the audiences have become quite out behind the curve, really. They think being in the charts is the indication of what makes a big record. Well, really, if you talk to any artist now, what they want is a video game.
Or sync.
A video game, a movie, an advert. That's where your money is.
Exactly.
Getting into the charts is very expensive. The sales are no longer there to support that expense, which is why you see all these bands on the road the whole time. And so the whole dynamic's changed. And so in a way, independent charts, you know, like the Heritage chart run by Mike Reed, the iTunes even, although obviously is still controlled a little bit by the majors, but it doesn't involve playlisting. And that's the problem, because a lot of radio is controlled by the major labels. It's a bit of a cartel, like you see at the Brits, you know. And so I think, I mean, from our point of view, we've just had to downsize our thinking and everything, because you can't compete.
Yeah, but I mean, in fairness to you guys, I mean, you've always remained consistently strong. I mean, you're putting out new material all the time. I mean, you just released another album called The Singles back in June last year. And I mean, we spoke back and forth, Richard, on the phone, you know, about that. And, you know, we didn't do anything on camera at that point because you were just so busy. But I mean, I don't think people realize how much work goes into an album. I mean, can you give us a bit of a flavor? I mean, how long does it take to pull that together?
It's more, because we're independent, the biggest issue is money.
Yeah,
it's cash flow, because we have to pay for everything. So if you know, we've got some big gigs coming up later in the year, and what we have to bear in mind is the money we have to invest when compared to the money we're getting paid for the gig. People still think, funny enough, I think people still think that it's all a bit kind of, you make it up as you go along. Oh, you need a microphone? What do you mean? What do you mean you need a microphone? You need a drum kit. You know, It's a little bit of that going on, you know. And so we have to be a bit mindful. But in terms of recording, it's a lot of work. I mean, that album we did, which was re-recording everything we'd ever done before.
Yeah.
See that tape?
Well, some of it we'd done before, because we had we'd done it piecemeal over a few years. But the last finishing the album was about just under about 3 weeks, including the mix.
Yeah,
that's actually quite fast.
That would have been intense. That would have been intense.
I mean, if you look at we're working with a producer at the moment called Sam Williams, and Sam did Supergrass and Plan B and stuff. And we've got a new single we're doing with him at the moment, which will be out in the summer. And it sounds great, but the attention to detail that Sam's putting into this record is extraordinary.
I couldn't,
way above my pay grade, you know. And it's sounding fantastic. We're getting a great response, and we're just debating how we're going to afford to try and run the record. Also, if you read some write-ups about like Watermelon High, the Harry Styles record, that on and off in the making or completing was almost a year. And I think sometimes the records, some songs come together really quickly and you're lucky, and other times records take time.
Well, I heard that Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys took 6 months to mix.
Yeah, they kept going back, didn't they?
Not just to record,
yeah,
just mix it. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I think people have a very, it's very strange too. You know, people will pay £3 for a cup of coffee, but they bulk are paying £3 for a track, which may last.
In terms of sort of writing, I mean, do you both contribute to sort of writing the material, the songs, the lyrics? Yeah, you do. Yeah,
I do all the good stuff.
Yeah, I do the rough stuff. I'm very busy.
Yeah, Fred. Yeah, we do it. We split pretty. Fred does all the lyrics. Mostly does all the lyrics.
Do you know what's really good to see? What's really good to see with you two as well is, I mean, you're brothers, aren't you? And you've been. I mean, I mean, it's great to see that bond is as strong as it ever has been.
Yeah, well, but life's so short, you know.
Yeah, I think it has to be, and I think you know, when I see certain artists just falling out, I just think they haven't stopped to smell the coffee and realize how lucky they are. And count their blessings, and also look at the last 4 years. I mean, it's 4 years, isn't it? 4 years this month.
Crazy.
We had the lockdown, March 23rd, and it is. If you look at what's happened, and the families have been split up, and communities, and businesses, and people's spirits and their liberties. And the one thing you need is to keep your unit together at the moment. Family, your best friends, and I know sometimes it's difficult when you have such differing opinions, and we've made new friends and lost lots of old friends.
Yeah,
but I think we do fall out occasionally, but when you actually stop to think, is it worth it? What are we going to do? Argue about what?
Exactly.
You know, and it's not. You know, I just think people get really immersed in this real tunnel thinking.
Yeah.
With you know,
and also in the West, we tend to value, in terms of the music business, we tend to value the bottom line, bums on seats, and all that stuff. And what I find interesting is that some of the most influential artists over the years have been artists that couldn't fill the O2.
Yeah, exactly. But one other thing that I've noticed with you guys as well is that you've got an incredibly good way of dealing with the people that support you and their the fans, the fan base, the people. I mean, you know, you are good at that, and I think that people appreciate when an artist like yourselves actually takes time to maybe respond to somebody on X, for example, or puts a comment back to somebody.
I have a bit of a short. I manage that account, and I have a very short fuse with haters. I used to engage, and now I just block. It's like if you were talking to me like that in a pub, I just walk away. I wouldn't talk to you. So why act any differently online? So I used to try and engage, and you say, but you've got that wrong, and we've done it. Who cares?
Yeah. Also, I think you have to. I've come off X. Going back a bit, X is a really useless name for this.
It's dreadful.
I mean, I don't know Elon Musk, but I would say if I was a friend of his, I'd say, "What are you doing?" Twitter makes sense. Xing? Yeah. What is that? So, I mean, I'm not, I don't know him, but if I was a mate, I'd say, mate, this is not the right way to go with that. Anyway, I've come off X because if you're not careful, the negativity out there, it can eat into you. It can be very, very bad for you. And you see the whole world in a very negative way. And that can bleed into the way you see other people, the way you see your neighbors, the way you see your friends. And so I've taken a little bit of time off. And I made that announcement on X the other day, and people were very sweet. They were very, very, very supportive. Yeah.
But I mean, as you were saying, I mean, just come back to yourself, Fred, what you were saying over the last 4 years, we've seen. I mean, who could have predicted what? You know, I remember the summer of 2019. I was campaigning down in London a lot. I was doing a lot of stuff, as you guys know, with the Brexit Party, and it was having a ball. I've got to say, it was good fun. It was hard work. It was intense. I enjoyed my time, and I did that for it was a very intense period of time. But I remember distinctly working a lot with people that were, some of them in the Brexit Party were actually traditional left. You know, they weren't like UKIP or Conservative. I mean, a lot of them were. But actually, there was a lot of people there that were staunch Brexiteers, but they were from the left. A little bit like George Galloway, actually, in many regards. And he's a staunch Brexiteer too. I remember sitting in this, I'd been slaving away, doing a lot of interviews for other candidates. I was interviewing other candidates. The air conditioning had broken down. It was in the height of summer. It was like in there early in the morning till like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Coming out, and there's a little pub just along the road. You know, this is in the heart of London.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down there, just having a beer, and I was thinking, wow, it's so nice to be out here in the fresh air. Beautiful afternoon in the heart of London. People milling around.
Yeah.
Who could have thought the next few years and what would have come? You know.
Exactly.
And I want to ask you, because I know that you guys are, you know, you've got some views on different things in politics and different types of stuff. I mean, we've followed each other for a long time, and I think you've got some great content, and I love to see the posts that you guys put out. I mean, we've got a problem here with a Conservative Party that, quite frankly, isn't Conservative anymore, at least not in my opinion. Don't know what you guys think. And we've got an official opposition with Sir Keir Starmer, who's just another globalist as far as a lot of people are seeing it. I mean, where do you think we went wrong, and do you see anything changing for the better? I mean, what's your take on it as guys that are from a very particular type of business? I mean, do you have a view on that at all? Where do you think we're going to be heading in the next sort of 6 months?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. I think what you're seeing is an unveiling of some lifestyles. I think the current lawsuit against P. Diddy, sorry, Puff Daddy, wasn't it then P. Diddy? There's a lawsuit. I think there's Rodney Jones is the seventh defendant now, I think, or not defendant, what's called claimant.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. I read I don't know how true it is, so I better just paraphrase that, but I read that Abercrombie Fitch had been dragged into some sex trafficking scandal, and I don't know how true that is, so I don't want to get sued by Abercrombie Fitch. But what's interesting is you're seeing certain. There's a conversation that's becoming very visible now, and there's a cynicism that's very visible. I think George Galloway getting elected, people saying it's the Muslim vote. I'm not convinced by that, because I don't know how true this is, but I was told Rochdale is 74% white. I don't know if that's exactly right, but anyway. But I think it's more to do with his independent stance. And I think it's more to do with that he's not Conservative, he's not Labour, and he's not Liberal. I think it's much more to do with that. And he is, whether you agree with George or not, you cannot deny he's a brilliant orator. He's just,
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you saw the report from Sky News. I'm sure he got absolutely eaten alive by George Galloway. I mean, George, I followed him a long time, and he's followed me. But you know, George, I have to say, I have a lot of respect for him. I mean, I don't agree with everything he says, and I don't agree with some of his views. But what he isn't is he's not a member of Davos. He's not a World Economic Forum devotee. He's not a globalist. No. And he was a good Brexiteer.
Yeah, one thing what I find amazing with Starmer particularly. Do you remember the time when he was asked whether he'd rather be in Westminster or Davos, and he said Davos.
Yeah, Davos. Yeah.
And I remember thinking, hold on a second. The only reason anybody's talking to you is because of Westminster.
Yeah,
because that's what put you there. How dare you? How dare you sort of put into the second league, if you like, the British people, as opposed to the people in Davos? I couldn't get my head around it. And the fact that people are still prepared to put a tick next to the Labour Party now is staggering to me. I just can't. I'm not a Tory either. I mean, I wouldn't vote for either of them. But the idea that you have somebody aiming to be the Prime Minister of this country who has admitted to having a favourite place to be other than Westminster is staggering. You would never have got Peter Shaw saying that back in the day.
No, never.
One of the things I feel really strongly about with the new left is if you go back to Peter Shaw speaking at the Oxford debate at EEC, and he was arguing against Jeremy Thorpe and Edward Heath about joining the EEC, although we'd already had that's right, they fought for a referendum. What's interesting about Peter Shaw, he was on the left of the Labour Party back in the day. And he was deeply patriotic, and he was proud of being British. And what I find really weird about the cultural shift that's gone on in the UK is this self-flagellation that we've got into in the UK. We're not proud of being British. We're not proud of anything we've done. We're ashamed of everything we've done, actually. Being white is a bit of a problem. I mean, white and male and bald. I mean, it's gay. I mean, you put it all together. It's not exactly a strong ticket. So that's my problem. I think it's a kind of for a nation to become successful, it has to, at the very least, believe in itself.
Oh, you've got it 100%. I mean, Sir Keir Hardie, that started the Labour movement back in the day, a fellow Scot in Glasgow. I mean, he'd be turning in his grave if he saw the modern Labour Party.
Yeah.
Just and going back to Brexit. I mean, going back to the Brexit Party. When I first joined, I mean, I'm a former Tory, right? I'll be honest with you, but I was traditional. I was, traditional defence, strong in defence, strong in law and order, good on business, education, all type of thing, traditional kind of stuff. When I joined the Brexit Party, I had assumed incorrectly that I was going to be with a lot of other disgruntled Tories or people from UKIP. That wasn't the case. I would say about 40% of people that were involved in the Brexit Party were from the traditional Labour left.
Okay. Right.
And they used to laugh when people talked about them being a far right party. They'd be in stitches, and people just a lot of people didn't realise that. But you're absolutely 100% right. They have become something completely different. Same with the Conservative Party. They're really only conservative in name only. They're just a globalist mob, aren't they?
They are.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't watch it all. I couldn't stand it. But I watched some of the Rishi Sunak speech outside, and it was just pitiful. And I don't know if I guess he's just reading it. I don't know who wrote it. I don't know.
I think Keir Starmer wrote it.
I think that's who did it. Yeah, definitely.
But it was I'm watching this guy, and I'm just saying, what do you believe in? You don't believe in anything. You don't know why you're there. You weren't even elected. He's having a guy, George Galloway, who's just been elected. I mean, the hypocrisy was extraordinary.
George Galloway was very strong with the guy from Sky. Yeah, he kept referring. I have a mandate.
Yeah.
Why you keep quoting to me Richie Sunak, who has no mandate?
That's right.
This is the world we've got into. It's completely bizarre.
It's upside down,
we got some petrol for the car today, and I was looking at all the front pages of today's newspapers, and there's not one mention of what's been going on with the farmers, with the strikes in Brazil. It's if you were looking at the British press, you would think it's all about some game show, the royal family. It is the level of the narrowness, the myopic narrowness of the news reporting in the mainstream media. That's why everything that you're doing and lots of other people doing on this platform has been so crucial, and that's why they're getting a little bit twitchy about it.
That's why the legacy media and also, as you say, a lot of MPs are getting twitchy because they're seeing the power of people like, I know, Russell Brand or Tucker Carlson, or Joe Rogan, whoever it happens to be, Katie Hopkins, yourself, you're putting a footprint down, and I think it's driving them nuts because they're looking at, what are we going to do?
I think you're right. I mean, we are winning the information war, and they don't like it, and that's why the whole focus of the World Economic Forum at Davos, the last meeting that they had there, wasn't about curing poverty or world hunger or stopping war. No, it was disinformation and misinformation. That was their primary admitted focus. Rebuilding trust. Yeah, we're going to censor you and rebuild trust, right? These guys are insane, but they're really dangerous. And I mean, I have got huge respect for people that have got to be honest, got the balls to stand up and speak out, because it takes real guts and leadership. And that's where George Galloway's got it. Richie Sunak doesn't have that. I mean, I don't know what you guys think of Reform. I think they've got great people in Reform UK, but I don't like their leader. And I don't mean Ben Habib. He's a great guy. I'd love to see Ben running the party. Yeah, I think a lot of people do. Richard Tice, he's sort of checking to see what's most popular, what's trending, and then he'll take a position. There's nothing, I mean, in my opinion, I don't think he's got real leadership talent or ability. And I was having a very interesting comment with a former colleague of mine on his show on TNT Radio called James Freeman, the Freeman Report. And James, James. So James is a former Brexit Party MEP, great guy. So I was on with him, and he was saying, Jim, what do you think about this? And do you see a real upset coming for the sort of the uniparty system? I said, well, yeah, absolutely. George Galloway, I actually think he's got them running stone cold. I mean, they are terrified. They're terrified. And I think Sir Keir Starmer, actually, Labour has probably got more reason to be worried than anybody else. I mean, the Conservatives are imploding right now. But I think Keir Starmer thought he would have a shoe in. It was like a baton handover, one World Economic Forum devotee to the next. Along comes George Galloway. Hey, I'm not having that. And he may very well not just stick at Rochdale. He, as the leader of the Workers' Party in the UK, we could see other candidates flocking to him, and that could be a real problem for Labour. What do you think?
Well, I think that title is really interesting, the Workers' Party, because it's everybody.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
you could be a consultant surgeon, you could be working sweeping the streets. You're a worker, one way or another. You're a worker, and so it's a huge tent that you can possibly mine there.
And also, I think he is a guy that would attract other people. I think you'd look at him and say, no, that is a leader. He could lead a party.
Yeah,
and I think, and whether you agree, as you say, you don't have to agree with him on all points. I don't, and but I've got a lot of time for him. I think he's. I think it's rare that you see someone and you actually believe what they say. You know, when I'm watching,
because he believes what he says. He believes what he says.
Exactly.
Watching Jeremy Hunt the other day, and Sunak and Starmer, woman, Rayner.
Oh, Claire Rayner.
No, Angela Rayner.
Angela Rayner. Claire Rayner, sorry.
Claire Rayner, I'd vote for.
I'd vote for her.
I mean,
sorry.
She's bad days,
yeah.
And Sadiq Khan, who I think is one of the most toxic people.
Oh, yeah.
And in my opinion,
Lee Anderson's getting a heck of a hard time. I mean, Lee Anderson's all right. I mean, he says it once again. He's a guy that'll say what he thinks. I mean, rightly or wrongly, that's what people want, isn't it? They want people that are going to say what they really think instead of being trying so smooth. You know,
the weird thing is, I think, Jim, is that when somebody says what they think, it's a huge problem.
It is, yeah.
So George Galloway says what he thinks, it's a huge problem. You know, Lee Anderson says what he thinks, he's forced to apologise by the party. So what that tells, you know, the old saying that you're over the target when you start getting flack. It's that. It's exactly that.
Yeah. Well, on that, we were booked in for I won't say too many details, but we were booked in for a big gala, and it was to do with politicians and press in Europe. And they wanted the guys that sing I'm Too Sexy, You're My Mate and stuff. And they couldn't really remember our names, probably, but they can remember the song. Anyway, they book us. And then obviously someone's gone online and said, oh, that's the band, is it? They've gone online and thought, oh, bloody hell, they don't like politicians. They don't like mainstream, so they've cancelled us. And so what I think what's happened is that you're seeing people it's interesting because on one hand we've been cancelled from that show, but we've been put on festivals for because of what we've said. So it sort of swings around about. So what's interesting now with this new record, we're getting a lot of interest, and we're speaking to one promoter, and I said, look, is our opinion now still a problem? He said no. He said I'm speaking to BBC, I'm speaking to don't care. They're just there. They either want you on or they don't. It's nothing based on anything you've said. So I think that's changed quite a lot because we were definitely cancelled. I know we were because our agent told us we were. And I think that's changed. And I think you're still going to get some. Yes, we know that there's some artists that won't work with us because of what we said. And but that's going. I think partly because of some of what we said has been proven to be right, you know, which is
well on that fact, Fred. I mean, I think you and I guys started to follow each other round about because I was very much against the vaccine mandates. I mean, I'm a freedom-loving individual. I don't think anybody should be forced to do anything like that. Medical consent. I mean, Geneva Convention, Nuremberg, you know, all of those types of things for those very reasons. And I think that's kind of how we kind of got to follow each other. But I mean, you know, for anybody that doesn't or hasn't seen your sort of work or the kind of things you talk about, I mean, just to recap on that, because it is still a very important thing, especially when we're talking about the World Health Organization, Disease X, this dreaded Disease X that is supposed to be coming, that incidentally, they've got a vaccine for already, you know, right, okay. But I mean, what was your views? I mean, what did you guys think? Were you both of the same opinion at the same time? And what did you guys think when they started talking about this?
Yeah, Fred got there first. He was down the rabbit hole, so to speak.
Yeah,
long before I was. I only really came on board when I started hearing the Build Back Better mantra. Once I heard that from Trudeau right the way across to Bern in New Zealand, that's when I thought, this doesn't feel right. You know, it doesn't feel right.
Also, we live in Berkshire, and so we're on a flight path. So when the lockdown happened, and I was living in Spain at the time, but I was in the UK when the lockdown happened, so I couldn't go home, and so I'm here, and we're everything's going to lockdown, and we're sitting here and we're just watching planes go over and over. I think, what sort of lockdown is this then? So we jump in our car, I think, stuff the lockdown. So we drive up to Heathrow. And I went up to Terminal 5, and I'm looking at the arrivals. So we went in there, went to the arrivals, and it's Bangkok and Seoul.
All flying in.
All flying in. I'm thinking, well, this isn't much of a lockdown, is it? I think, well, this is immediately I start, this is bullshit. And then when they start talking about masks, and we've got doctors in our family, and I know their opinions on that. And then when they started the vaccine, fine, if you want to take a vaccine, we get called anti-vax, not anti-vax at all. We've never said that in our lives. And what happened is that we just said it should be choice. And people like Piers Morgan, who obviously now has done a 180 of course.
Yeah.
But the way we would treat it was as if we had suggested that we should assassinate the Queen or something. It was extraordinary behaviour, and all we did was people should have a choice. It was really that simple.
Yeah, the attack is, if you try and find a common theme, because these attacks are coming in from all directions of one kind or another, whether, as you say, whether it's the WHO or the WEF or Stop Oil or whatever it is, or Gaza, it doesn't matter where, but one way or another, what is the one thing or the two things that ties it all together? And I think it's two things. I think it's one, an attack on democracy, democratic accountability, which is what we saw outside the House of Commons the other day. And individual sovereignty, and those are the two things that are being undermined. I think individual sovereignty was being undermined during the mask nonsense because people were being encouraged to do what they were told rather than think for themselves. And I think some of these massive corporations, like or these geopolitical systems like the EU or NATO or whatever, those are all about undermining national sovereignty. That's what they are. And the minute you undermine national sovereignty, you rob people of their democratic right to alter the direction of the country they live in, and I think that's a real problem. Yeah, real problem.
I think what's
sorry, on you, Fred.
I thought what was interesting is how people so readily believed a proven liar like Boris Johnson. Because what I thought, quite a few mates of mine, people like live around here, and I'm thinking, well, they're going to see through this. Look at Johnson, he's a clown. But they didn't, and they hate him. But the minute he talked about health, they believed him. And I just thought, why is that? I don't get it.
Do you ever remember seeing that clip? And I think it was Sajid Javid talking to a guy who was thinking about getting jabbed in the street.
Yes.
Talking to him a bit like a drug dealer on a corner.
Go get it.
Come on, let's go. Get it. It was sort of like trying to sell coke to somebody who was reluctant to buy it.
I know.
It didn't, nothing about it. I mean, I've said this a million times. It's probably a bit of a hackneyed thing now, but I keep saying you don't need to be a 5-star chef to know when the fish is off. You walk into the restaurant, and if the fish is off, doesn't matter how many stars above the door. If the fish is off, you know it straight away. And that, for me, I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a scientist. I don't have any scientific background whatsoever. Just like Bill Gates. Yeah, exactly.
That's a good point.
But it didn't feel right. It just didn't.
Well, I mean, one of the things that really horrified me was how people changed. I mean, I'll give you an example. I remember growing up watching, what was it? That's Life. I don't know if you guys remember that. Esther Rantzen. I mean, it was actually, I mean, I was only a young kid at the time, but I used to watch it with my mum and that, and my dad, and just always considered her to be sort of a stalwart of common sense and decency. And she did Childline, and she did all these good things. And then the next thing I know, she's turning around and she's been interviewed. I think it was by Dan Wootton on GB News when he was still there.
Yeah.
And she's saying, oh, yeah, if you're not vaccinated, you can just stay at home and die, effectively. I mean, I'm paraphrasing slightly, but did you remember seeing that?
I do.
I mean, and there was loads of other people.
Yeah.
Loads of them. Then you had Peter Andre with Jabs Army. I mean, they went. I mean, anyone who just said, "I'm getting vaccinated, do what you want," a bit like Trump did in a way. In fairness, he get Fauci on board. That's another
story.
That's another story.
Yeah.
But, people, I really get bodily autonomy. Do what you want to do. And what I found really weird, you had a lot of women, particularly like the Emma Thompsons of this world, talking about my body, my choice when it came to abortion, which I completely agree with. And then when it came to vaccination, it wasn't my body, my choice. It was my body, government choice. And I just thought, how can that be? That makes no sense.
But what you're saying, Jim, about people changing, one thing, our parents died, our father died in the late 80s, mum died about 7 years ago. And Dad's thing, he was in the Merchant Navy during the Second World War. And his thing was i.e. Nazism, fascism, whatever, would never happen in the UK. We were fundamentally different from the experience in Germany. And he went to his grave believing that completely. And I'm pleased he's not around now to see.
He'd be heartbroken.
He would be heartbroken to see how easily people can be psyoped. And I think that's what it was. We drove out into the middle of the countryside today, 2 people standing at a bus stop in the middle of nowhere with masks on.
It was extraordinary.
Oh, I know. It's extraordinary. Well, I went to Canada just not that long ago, actually. It was towards the end of 2023. And I went there, not for long. I was only there for about 4 or 5 days. I flew into Toronto, but I was behind this young lad. He was a really pleasant, young lad. He was sitting sort of diagonally in front of me with a mask on from London Heathrow all the way to Toronto. And, he didn't look well. He looked ashen. I don't think these things are healthy to be. They don't stop anything anyway. But when I got to Ottawa, I've got to be honest, guys, I love the Canadians. I met leaders of the freedom movement over there, Tamara Lich, Chris Barber, Harold Juncker. There's a whole bunch of people there, great people. And I went there specifically with the intent to meet them and to talk to them about freedom and what was going on, because at that point I hadn't gone national with it, or I hadn't gone open with it, but I'd been working on a freedom movement called Freedom to International for about 14 months, talking to lots of people in Canada, in the States, and basically the whole point of it was to be so we could continue to communicate around the world and find out what was really going on in those respective countries. But when I was in Ottawa, there was a general fear of people. There was people that were afraid to say anything, and it's this chilling effect on free speech, which I noticed and detected. But going back to your point about the fascism side of things, what seems to be very clear to me is that there is a lot of people in the World Economic Forum that are kind of a mix between hardcore communists and fascists. It's a very strange blend. And do you see where I'm coming from with that, guys? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think some of the stuff they're talking about, Yuval Harari, this sort of transhumanism, it's very odd behavior, and the idea that humans are worth less now because they've decided they are, and also this mad idea that you're going to save the planet by cutting down trees and putting up wind farms or putting up solar power. I mean, it's just, and there's a thing on one of the farmers' blogs the other day, which was this lady, which was really interesting. I didn't know anything about this, but it's been proven now that cows cows emit much less carbon than they take in. So they're green.
Right, so cows are very green.
Cows are green. And this lady who's obviously a farmer, she's all these facts and figures were whizzing down the screen while she's talking. And what we're being told is, and if you're not careful, you tend to get dragged into this as well. You start to see it from very, very narrow perspective, and just sort of change the subject a little bit. That's why we backed away from the so-called truth movement a little bit, because it got a little bit narrow and quite egotistical, and then people started. We saw people
trying to get their own TV show.
You know what I mean. Sharp. We just thought, this isn't really for us. So look, they're more powerful. They've got to do what they want to do, but it didn't really fit with us. So we tend to try and stay independent from all that.
One thing I think they haven't. I think they've thought about it, but they just don't have they haven't got the nerve to talk about it. They've talked about cows farting, but there are lots more people on the planet farting than there are cows. They haven't actually talked about the male nappy or but they will do. They will. That'll be the next thing. So I find the whole thing. And the other thing that really gets my goat is that ordinary people with their taxes pay for everything. If there were no taxes, no VAT, nothing, and it was, how long do you think the UK would last? How long would it last? It's a little bit like you hire a gardener. You hire a gardener to do your garden, and one day he comes up to the front door, bangs on the front door, and he says, "Yeah, I've had a look at your garden. I decided it might be better if we concrete it over." No, you're my gardener. I'm paying you, mate, right? You know what I mean? So I don't understand how we have forgotten that we pay for everything. Ordinary people are the bosses. We make the rules. We will decide. Yeah. And I went out for a walk today with the chemtrails everywhere, and I was thinking, hold on. I've tweeted about this several times. Why aren't we being asked?
Or told
what, what's in it? Where does it take off? Who pays for it?
It's very interesting. It's very interesting about the chemtrails, because I've actually been doing a little bit of research on that, and I think we're definitely going to have you guys back on to maybe explore some of that as well. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Well, I'm going to have to watch the time because we're approaching the last bit of the segment. But listen, is that something you'd be happy to do? Would you come back on again, guys?
Yeah. To be honest with you, I don't know a huge amount about it. So I'd be quite interested to listen and learn.
Yeah. Well, just before we sort of close it off, I mean, you talked about the new material that you're working on for the summer. I mean, is that actually coming out? Has that been revealed yet, or is that something that's still to come?
We've got meetings on Friday and Saturday. We're having some remixes done and mastering and all that kind of stuff. So because we're independent, there's not one machine that says this is what you will have to do. But we are.
Where can people find your music? I mean, where is it all listed? Tell us a little bit where they can get that. I mean, what's your website? And
website is rightsaidfred.com. Then obviously we're on Twitter or X as the Freds. We're Right Said Fred Official on Instagram, Right Said Fred on Facebook. And obviously music is on iTunes and Spotify, and also on our own website. And they can actually see us this year. We're slowly getting uncancelled. So we are actually in the UK this year. We're headlining a festival. I'm reading it now. St Albans, Hertfordshire, on the 10th of August. That's the Freedom Festival. And on the 25th of August, we're at the Sunshine Festival.
I might come down to that.
Yeah, you'd be very welcome.
You'd be very welcome, absolutely.
So we're slowly being uncancelled, but we've just had some requests coming from South Africa, Hungary, and Germany. So we're slowly being sort of ushered back into the flock.
What to wear? That's the issue. What to wear? I've got no idea. I'm going to have to work on that.
Just don't wear anything. Flex the muscles, guys. No, from the top upwards, I was going to say.
Watch out, I might do that. I might just do that.
I think we've retired our kids. They're retired now. Yeah.
For the last minute and a half, guys, as I always do with my guests on the show, I'm going to give you guys the last word. So the floor is yours. Talk about whatever you want to talk about.
I think what we're going to talk about, I just think people need to just broaden what they listen to in terms of, if you listen to BBC, also listen to podcasts. And if you just listen to podcasts, listen to a bit of mainstream media, and don't accept what you're being told, which loads of people are still. Yeah. And I just think it's good to have that balance.
Yeah, exactly. And just because what you hear on the radio is not the summation of what's out there. And when we were in India many years ago, the guy was saying, we went past a massive auditorium, and he said, Elton John filled that out for 3 nights. And we thought, that's jolly good, And he said, yes, but we've got an Indian artist who was there for a month. And we've never heard of it.
Yeah.
So it's important to remember that just because that's the Western music is what we all listen to, it's a mistake to think that that's what's going on in totality.
I think all of us, including us, yourself, everybody, it never does any harm to broaden your scope.
If you don't like it,
Yeah.
One genius, anybody watching this, Jake Thackeray. You have got to listen to Jake Thackeray. An English singer-songwriter genius, all but forgotten now. Yeah.
Maybe we need to tune into him and see what he's got to, what words of wisdom he's got to say.
He was very funny. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
No, my absolute pleasure. Richard and Fred Fairbrass of Right Said Fred. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you both on. I look forward to having you back on again. It's been an absolute pleasure to see you both, and I wish you very well in the future.
Thanks, Jim. Thank
you
very much.
Have a good day.
And for all the people that are watching this, once again, my sincere thanks to each and every one of you for listening in, sharing the content, and helping to spread the word. I am very grateful. This is Jim Ferguson. Thanks, guys. We'll speak soon. Cheers guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.